Masechet Yevamot, Daf Lamed Zayin. We're on 36b towards the bottom. We've been talking about a case where a woman is pregnant or nursing and is divorced or her husband dies. Another man should not marry her within 20 until she's finished nursing at 24 months after she gives birth, so that the baby, so she will not lose milk, and that will ensure the health of the baby. If someone violates this law and marries within 2 years, those 2 years, then everyone agrees we force him to divorce, and according to one opinion, he may never take her back. All right, that was the case we just discussed, and now we're going to ask a question about that case, and comparing it to a different case that we have here. Amar le Rav Asher le Rav Hoshaya bered Rav Idi. So Rav Asher is asking Rav Hoshaya based on the following case. So we're going to learn this following case first, and then in a few lines we'll get to the original case of nursing. Hatam tenan. We have, this is a braita, even though it says tenan, there is a braita that says, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, kol sheshaha be'adam shiloshim yom, eno nefel ha, lo shaha sifeka haveh. When a woman gives birth, that child is still not considered a viable child until 30 days passes. So as long as 30 days passes, it's not considered a stillborn. So that would be significant if a woman who is pregnant, her husband dies, and they have no other children, then if it's past 30 days and she gives birth, then you know, if she gives birth and it lives for 30 days, then you know this deceased man has a child and there's no yibum. But if it dies within 30 days, then it is not a completely viable child. What is its status? So we derive from his language, Eha lo shaha sifeka haveh. It's not for sure not good, it's just safek, right? Because it was born alive, but didn't make it 30 days, it's considered a doubt whether this is considered a viable child, and therefore the deceased has a child, and there's no yibum or chalitza, or perhaps now it died, and so it's not viable, and therefore the deceased man has no children, and she was required to do yibum or chalitza. It's a safek. Okay. Ve'itemar met betoch shiloshim yom ve'amda v'nitkadesha. So what's going to be the status? In the case of safek, generally we're going to say du chalitza. But what if she doesn't? What if instead she says, oh look, I had a child, so therefore the deceased had a child, so I can go ahead and marry anyone else. Not realizing that because it died within 30 days, it's not for sure a viable child. So what are we going to do in such a case? So if it dies, and she goes and does kiddushin with someone else. Two opinions. Ravina mishme de Rava. Ravina reports in the name of his teacher Rava Amar, im eshet Yisrael hi choleset. If the person who did kiddushin to her, this guy from the shuk, is a Yisrael Zanan Kohen, then she should do chalitza with the Yavam, just in case you consider this child that was born to be not viable, and in which case she would require yibum or chalitza. She still has a zikah, do chalitza, break the zikah, and then she can go back to this Yisrael who did kiddushin with her. V'meshet kohen hi ena choleset. But if the person who did kiddushin with her is a kohen, now you have a problem, because if she does chalitza, she will be prohibited to be with a kohen, because a chalitza has the same laws as a gerusha, as a divorcee. So therefore, in order to accommodate her, we don't want her to have to lose out on this relationship with this kohen. So we say, you know what, don't do chalitza. In any case, it was just a safek. We weren't sure. So in this case, we can presume on the side that the child that was born alive, even though it died, is a viable child, even though it died within 30 days. And therefore it's viable, and she didn't have a zikah, and she can continue with her life, just be machmir in case it is Yisrael. That's what Ravina said in the name of Rava. However, another student, Rab Meshashia Mishmed Rava Amar, also in the name of Rava, said, Achadzo v'chadzo choleset. In either case, whether married to Israel or it's a kohen that did the kiddushin, she has to do chalitza, which means it's if a kohen, then the kohen will be prohibited to her. She's got to go find another guy. So Rav Meshashiya's version of Rava is more stringent. That it's a case of doubt, but it's a serious doubt, and you cannot just assume that the child was viable and she can go marry anyone else. Okay, now Ravina and Rav Meshashiya have continued their conversation about what Rava actually said. Amar le Ravina le Rav Meshashiya. Ravina, who was more lenient and had the lenient version, says, "Be'urta amar Rava hachi u'b'safra hadar be." He said, Rav Meshashiya, you're right. In the nighttime when we were discussing this, he did in fact say what you said was stringent, but he thought about it over the night. He slept on it, and in the morning he was more lenient and said, Kohen does not have to do chalitza. So he changed his mind, and your version is not correct. Amar le sharitu yerava ditishtaru af tarba. Rav Meshashiya did not accept that. He says, I reported correctly, I know what happened, and you're going to permit the Kohen to be with her? May it be God's will that you will find a way to permit even non-kosher fat of an animal. Sarcastically saying, you just made something not kosher as if it's kosher. If you can, it's the same as doing that by coming and saying that we have a safek here. It could very well be that she required yibum, and now you're saying that she's going to go and marry a kohen and stay with him without chalitza. So no, there's no way that Rava changed his mind about this. This is the law. Okay, good. That was all the discussion about that other case. And now here is the question we've been leading up to. What we started with. Rav Ashi asks Rav Hoshaya, I know that law regarding the child, the infant that died. But hacha gabe me'oberet chavero umeneket chavero nesuah lekohen mai is how about would we apply the same law here, assuming that we follow the lenient version in the case that she's married to a kohen? She got engaged to a kohen, thinking it was permitted. She can stay with the kohen, and no need to do a halisa. What would you say about a similar case regarding the pregnant woman or nursing woman, where also we said, the rabbis say, do not marry her until after 2 years of nursing? What if she went ahead and got married anyway, against the chachamim? Well, there we said, the rabbi said, they have to get a divorce. Okay, but what if she was married to a kohen? And now, if she divorces the kohen, they will not be able to be remarried, right? Assuming the lenient version of Rabbanan, right? That she, if it was Israel, get now and you can get remarried later. What about if it's a kohen? They won't be able to get remarried later. So can we follow the same leniency here? That Ravina said in the name of Rava. That's the question. Amaleh. Right, mi avud Rabbanan takanta lekohen or did the rabbis here also make an ordinance to help out a kohen and then permit them to remain? Maybe they have to separate, but no, don't give her a get or not. Amar le, and Rav Hoshaya responded, Hachi hashta, are these cases the same? They're not the same. Bishlama hatam kevan de'ikar Rabbanan, de peligi aleh de Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, de amre, af al gav de lo shaha valad ma'al yahaveh, gabe eshet kohen kevan de lo afshar abdinan kerabbanan. Over there, that braita that we quoted in the name of Rashbag, who said, Rashbag said, we consider, if it died before 30 days, we consider that a safek. But there's another opinion there that we didn't quote yet. It's the Chachamim, the Rabbanan there say, even if you did not wait 30 days, even if it did not survive, if the offspring did not survive 30 days, it's still considered a viable offspring. You don't have to wait 30 days as long as it's born, healthy, that's it, that's fine. It does not have to survive for 30 days, and that is considered an offspring. If it is considered offspring, then the deceased brother had a child, and therefore had child when he died, and therefore no need for yibum or chalisa. So that's why if it's a kohen that she goes ahead and does kiddushin with the kohen, since there's no other way to help her, so we'll follow Rabbanan. If it's a Yisrael, then we'll be machmir for Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. But there you have a way out, because after all, it's a machloket, and Rabbanan say that the child is viable, and you don't have to worry about it. So we can be lenient in that case. Aval hacha keman aved. But in this case, regarding the nursing woman or pregnant woman, who are we going to follow? Rabbi Meir is the most stringent, and he says that even for Yisrael, you have to give a get, and he can never marry her. So for sure, that's not going to help a Kohen. And even Rabbanan, the more lenient opinion there, says you have to give a get. And once you have to give a get, then if it's a Kohen, the Kohen may never remarry her. So yeah, that leniency only applies in that case, and it does not apply in the case of nursing. We next deal with yet another case where a husband is supposed to wait but doesn't. In this case, we're talking about a woman who is divorced or widowed. She's not supposed to remarry within 3 months because we want to verify if she had been pregnant from the original husband or not. And that way we'll know if she is pregnant, who the child belongs to, who is the father. But what if she does not wait? Itamar kiddusha betoch shelosha ubarach. A man comes and gives her kiddushin, and she accepts the kiddushin within 3 months since her husband died or she was divorced. And then he ran away. So there's a machloket. One side of the opinion says that we should excommunicate him and force him to give a get. That's what we would normally do, right? You did this, you violated. The rabbi said to wait 3 months, you didn't. And so now you better give a get, and if you don't, we excommunicate you until you do. And same thing here, it doesn't matter if he's around or he ran away. But the other opinion says the fact that he ran away, that actually helps him. That's enough. Because that shows that he's not going to do the nisuin, he's not going to consummate the marriage just yet. And so therefore, that's our entire point anyway. He does kiddushin, she accepted the money, but they were not intimate with each other. So we don't have to worry about the child, and he ran away. He'll come back, hopefully, after 3 months, and then he'll consummate the marriage, and we won't have any problem. So there's no need to force him to give a get. He already solved the problem by running away. And actually there was such a case, of a guy who did kiddushin and then ran away, and I went on a trip, or he knew that he would be excommunicated and he didn't want to, and so he ran away. And in fact, Rafram says that is sufficient. We do not have to force him to give a get. Okay, good. That was one case. Now, yet another case when you're also supposed to wait 3 months, and this is in the case of Yibum, when a man dies and he has no children, the Yavam, the living brother, should not do bi'ah, should not perform Yibum until 3 months pass. Now, if he does, then we have a problem, because a child that's born, where let's say she is pregnant and she has a child, we are not sure who the father is. It could be it's a 9-month-old, 9-month full-term baby from the deceased husband, in which case there was no need for Yibum, and that means the Yavam and the Yevamot sinned by being together. Or it could be that, let's say he does Yibum after 2 months, and then she is pregnant. Well, it could be that the child that's born is actually a 7-month-old preemie from the Yavam and the Yevamah, in which case that would mean that the deceased died without children, and this bi'ah that they did is proper Yibum, and they did not sin. Either way, the child will be just fine, not a mamzer. Either it's a good child from the deceased husband, or a proper child from this Yibum. So the child's okay either way. The problem is for the Yavam and Yevamah, if this child was from the deceased, then their cohabiting was in sin, and they would have to bring a korban. If it was for sure, it would be a korban chatat. In this case, since they're not sure, the Mishnah said they bring an asham talui. That's the discussion here. Amar leRava leRav Nachman lema helech achar rov nashim veRov nashim letisha yaldan. So the question Rava asks Rav Nachman is, why does the Mishnah say you bring asham talui? Why do we follow the majority? Majority of women have full-term pregnancies, would be 9 months. So we can assume that this was a 9-month pregnancy from the deceased husband, and this bi'ah was a bi'ah in sin, because the original husband had a child and they weren't allowed to be together. They did it by mistake. Maybe they didn't realize that she was pregnant. Fine. So you bring a korban hatat and not an osham talui. Right? The majority case should be sufficient for us to go in that direction and not just call it total safek. That's Rav's question, and Rav Nachman answers, Amaleh, Nashedidan, L'shivayaldan. He says, our woman in my family, our women give birth after 7 months. Okay, that's curious, but still doesn't change the law. Amaleh, Nashedidchu, Havuru Bada Alma. Okay, so the women in your family, are they the majority of the world? Do they tip everything towards the majority just because you have a few people in your family that have some kind of condition? Like this. So Amar le hachi kamin. Rav Nachman says, let me clarify what I meant to say. Rov nashim yaldan letish'a umiut leshiv'a v'chol hayoledet letish'a ubara nikar lishlish yameha v'zo ho'il ve'lo hukar ubara lishlish yameha itra leruba. I meant to answer your question by saying that most women in the world have a pregnancy for 9 months and a minority for 7 months. And anyone who does have a 9-month term, they will start showing after a third of the full pregnancy, meaning after 3 months. Now, in this case, it's talking about a case where it was not noticeable. She was not showing even after 3 months, and therefore, although yes, in the usual case we would follow the majority, but here the majority is compromised because there's something unusual about it in the fact that she's not showing. So you're right. If it was a regular case where she was showing after 3 months, we will follow the majority. But here we're talking about where she was not showing after 3 months, and so now we can't follow that majority anymore. Then we ask about that. Kol hayoledet letish'a ubara nikar l'shlish yameha medelahu kar l'shlish yameha ubara vadai bar shiv'a lebat ra'ahu. This is, wait a second. If in fact this is the case that a 9-month pregnancy will start showing after 3 months, and you're telling me that here is a case where she was not showing by 3 months, maybe that's what tripped them up in the first place, then actually I would say the opposite. From the fact that she is not showing by 3 months means that it's much more likely, even for sure, that this is a 7-month baby, and so therefore, for sure, this is from the Yavam, and the Yavam is the father. And therefore, we have no safek, no Hashem talui. This is a perfectly good relationship and no korban at all. So what did actually you mean? So finally, Rav Nachman explains, this is what I meant to say. Ela emarov hayoledet tisha ubara nikar lishlish yameha. Since most women who have a full-term pregnancy will start showing after 3 months, and in this case, since she did not show after 3 months, therefore the majority is compromised. It doesn't mean it's for sure the other way. It just means that we cannot assume that we have a majority in this direction. Okay, next section. Now that we've dealt with the status of the Yavam and Yevamah and their korban, let's focus on the child that is born. And Mishnah said that the first child is totally okay, either as the child of the deceased brother, who is kosher, or a child of the Yavam and Yevamah, in this case that's also totally kosher. But what if they remain together? They're not supposed to. If they remain together and they have a second child, what will be its status? Tenor Banan, Rishon Ra'ui Liot Kohen Gadol. The first child that's born has perfect lineage, and if he was a Kohen, he could be Kohen Gadol, no problem. Vesheni Mamzer Misafek. But the Braita notes a strange irony that the second one is going to be a possible mamzer, because if indeed the first child that was born was from the deceased brother, then there is no need for Yibum and Halisa, and now that the Yavam and Yevamah are together, that is an Isur Karet, and if they stay together and have a child, every child that they will have will be a possible mamzer. So certainly not good for Kohen Gadol. Okay, that's the Braita, but that's Tanakama. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer en mamzer misafek. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees and says, no, there is no such thing as an uncertain mamzer. Now, this is an uncertain mamzer. So what does Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov mean that it's not an uncertain mamzer? Is he being more machmir or more mekel than Tanakama? This is subject to a machloket amoraim. My kamar, what is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov saying? Amar Abaye hachi kamar, rishon ra'oi liot kohen gadol, v'sheni safek mamzer ve'asur b'mamzeret. So the first is totally fine. The second one is an uncertain mamzer, and therefore may not be with a certain mamzeret. All that is tanakama. See, the only thing worse than being a mamzer is being a safek mamzer. You think it's better to be a uncertain than for sure mamzer. But here's the thing: someone who's a for sure mamzer can at least marry another for sure mamzer. But someone who's doubtful, well, he may be kosher, and if he's kosher, he can't marry mamzer. But he may be a mamzer, therefore we can't marry someone kosher. So safek mamzer is the worst, and that is the opinion of Tanakama. The second one is mamzer misafek. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, eno safek mamzer, ela vaday mamzer, umutar b'mamzeret. Rabbi Eliezer here is being more lenient. I'm going to call, by saying that he's treated like a for sure mamzer, I know that sounds worse. I'm going to call that being lenient because at least he can marry a mamzer, a for sure mamzeret. So what he means is en mamzer misafek. Yes, it's true. There is an uncertainty here, but we are going to treat this uncertainty like a for sure mamzer, in that we will allow him to marry a mamzeret. And so, according to Abaye, and Abaye's version, Rabbi Eliezer is the more lenient than Tanakama. However, Rava takes the opposite view. He's going to switch the two opinions around. Rava amar hachi kamar, rishon ra'oi liot kohen gadol. Everyone agrees that the first child born is fine. V'sheni mamzer vaday misafek umutar b'mamzeret. And the second one is a mamzer that we treat as a definite mamzer because just in case he may be a mamzer. So therefore, we treat him as a full mamzer, and he may marry a mamzeret. So here Tanakama is the lenient one. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, en vaday mamzer misafek, ela safek mamzer, v'asur mi mamzeret. And he says, no, this is not a for sure mamzer because we're uncertain about the first child's father. Rather, this is simply an uncertain mamzer, and therefore prohibited to a mamzeret. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is the stringent one, stringent in saying that the second-born child will not be able even to marry a mamzeret or someone who's kosher, but it remains in that limbo status of being safek. Okay, so that's the opinion, but that's the difference of opinion between Abaye and Rava. Now, what's the source of this machloket between Abaye and Rava? How come each one is assuming what they are? Okay, note, we're going to need this to know this. Even though we have Tanakama here, and usually the halacha will follow Tanakama, who we assume to be the majority against a minority opinion. However, there is also a rule that says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, everything that he teaches is kaven naki, is succinct and clean, meaning we follow him for the halacha. So whoever they say is going to be whatever they say is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion, that will be the halacha. So according to Abaye, he thinks that he's follows the lenient version of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and Rava follows the stringent version of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Okay, so with that in mind, let's see. They are actually arguing about Rabbi Elazar, not to be confused with Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who we just talked about, a different Tana. Okay, what does Rabbi Elazar say? Di Tanan Mishnah and Kiddushin. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Vada'an bevada'an mutar, Vada'an bisfekan, usfekan bevada'an, usfekan bisfekan asur. He says a general rule that if you have someone who is for sure a problematic lineage, like a mamzer, to another for sure mamzer, they may marry each other. But someone who is surely a mamzer with an uncertainty, or uncertainty with a for sure, or two uncertain mamzerim, all of them are prohibited from marrying each other, even uncertain to uncertain, because this uncertain may be kosher, and the other one who's uncertain may be a mamzer, so they can't marry each other. That was the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. Ve'elo hen sefekan, and now the Mishnah lists those who are these uncertain status: shetuki, ve'asufi, ve'kuti. Shetuki, shatuk, from the language of quiet, meaning we don't know who the father is. Go ask him who the father is, and they quiet. We don't know. And so we're not sure if the father is mamzer or not. Asufi is someone, asuf, who is collected, a foundling. You found him in the basket on the doorstep. We don't know who his mother or father. And so also, we don't know if it's a mamzer or not. Kuti is a Samaritan, even according to the opinion that says Samaritans were converts. Nevertheless, although they converted and we accept their conversion, they were scared of the lions. Nevertheless, they do not follow halacha, and therefore they are not careful with gitin and kiddushin, and they may be married to one person and then separate from them without get and marry someone else, and the children will be perhaps mamzerim. Okay, so that's a data point about Rabbi Elazar. Do we follow Rabbi Elazar l'halacha? That's another machloket. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. So Rav says halacha could be Elazar. Yes, we follow that halacha, and therefore uncertain mamzerim may not marry anyone. Ki amrita kamed Shmuel amar li, but when Rav Yehuda was a student of both Rav and Shemuel, when he said this in front of Shemuel, Shemuel said, Hillel shana asara yochasin alumi bavel. Hillel, right, the elder, said that there were 10 categories of people of different genealogical status who came from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. Kahaneh Leviev Yisrael, so Kohen Levi Yisrael, all those are kosher and they could marry each other. Halaleh, those who cannot be with a Kohanim who are disqualified from being Kohen, who cannot marry a Kohen. Gereh, Harureh, and converts, or Canaanite slaves who were freed, who are like converts, are another status. Mamzereh, Netine, Shatuke, Ve'asufeh, and those who are for sure mamzerim. Natin is a descendant of the Gibeonites, who made believe they were Jewish. They weren't really Jewish, and so they were prohibited from marrying into the community. Shetukev Asufeh, who's we don't know their father or we don't know both parents, and so these are safek. And yet Hillel said, "V'chulan mutarin lavo zeh bazeh." They can marry each other. He doesn't mean that all 10 can marry each other, right? A Kohen cannot marry a mamzer. Even Yisrael can marry mamzer. Kohen cannot marry halal. Okay, so on. But within each category, within each grouping, they can all marry each other. And the last grouping was mamzer, together with those of uncertain mamzerut, and all are allowed to marry each other. You see, according to Hillel, uncertain mamzer is allowed to marry a mamzer, and Shemuel reported that. Ve'at amarat halacha kerebi Elazar, and so after quoting Shemuel, right? So then Rav Yehuda, Shemuel says back to Rav Yehuda, you're going to tell me according to Rav halacha kerebi Elazar and against Hillel. So you see here that Shemuel was more lenient and did not agree that halacha is like Rabbi Elazar, whereas Rav said halacha is like Rabbi Elazar, the stringent opinion in that Mishnah in Kiddushin. Okay, so now we know that all of that is already discussed and is a machloket. Abaye savar la ki Shmuel, damar halacha ki Hillel. Abaye follows Shemuel, who says halacha is like Hillel, the more lenient opinion, and therefore umukila Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov aliba de hilcheta kehechi de la tikshe hilcheta ahilcheta. Therefore, in the Braita that we quoted before, Abaye interprets Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov to be lenient, so that because he follows the halacha, always follows Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, as we said, and therefore, in order for the halacha to be consistent. So we want the halacha, and halacha is like Hillel, and Shmuel said halacha is like Hillel, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov halacha is like him. So he interpreted Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov to be the lenient opinion because he thought that Shemuel, the halacha follows Shemuel. Since halacha follows the lenient opinion, he wants to interpret Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov according to the lenient opinion. Whereas Rava savar like Rav, Rava thought that halacha is like Rav. Damar halacha Rabbi Elazar, who in turn said halacha is like Rabbi Elazar in the Mishnah and Kiddushin, and therefore, since that was his opinion, umukila de Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov aliba de hilcheta kehechi de la tikshe, and therefore he interpreted Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov in the Baraita to be more stringent, so that the halacha, which is follows him, would be consistent with the Pesach halacha that he accepted in the name of Rav, in the name of Rabbi Elazar, so that so that you would not have a contradiction of one statement of halacha against another. Next, Abaye is going to try to bring a proof for his lenient interpretation based on a baraita. Amar Abaye, mena min ala de kol sevekal Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov kevadai mashvele, as how do I can bring a source that according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, we treat an uncertain mamzer like a complete mamzer, and that's a leniency because then they can marry each other. How do I know that Rabbi Eliezer thinks that? Tetanya. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer, hare. שבא על נשים הרבה ואין יודע על איזה הוא מהן בא. וכן היא שבאו עליה נשים הרבה ואינה יודעת מאיזה מהן קיבלה. Let's say you have a case where a certain man has relations with many women and impregnates some of them, and he doesn't know who it is. Or if a woman, many men came upon her and she became pregnant and she doesn't know who the father is. Maybe they were in some drunken party and they wake up and they don't know what happened. ונמצא אב נושא את ביתו ואח נושא את אחותו ונתמלא כל העולם כולו ממזרין ועל זה נאמר ומלאה הארץ זימה. This is a terrible thing because you're going to end up having all this bunch of children that came from these parents, but none of them know who their father or mother is, and it could easily happen that a father will marry his daughter, a brother will marry a sister, and the whole world will become full of mamzerin. And this he's giving a warning not to do any actions like this. And now, what's the proof for Abaye? It says here that the whole world is full of mamzerim. Now, in all these cases, they're all uncertain mamzerim. No one knows for sure who the father is. They know who their mother is. They don't know who their father is. But it's uncertain, and therefore, at worst, it would be uncertain. But he calls it like mamzerim, meaning he treats uncertain like certain mamzerim. And regarding this, it says, Pasuk in Vayikra, that the whole world was full of zima, would be full of zima. Okay, so that's the proof for Abaye. It calls them all mamzerim, even though they're uncertain. No, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, by quoting the pasuk zima, the word zima itself is a concatenation of three words. What is it? This person, what is their status? Is they mamzer or not a mamzer? So the word zima itself means someone who is uncertain. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov considers all these people uncertain mamzerim. So although he uses the word mamzer, he means that they are uncertain mamzerim, and that's encoded in the word zima. And so therefore, Rava thinks that there is no proof. In fact, there's a proof the opposite way from the fact that it quotes this word zima. Okay, now that we quoted Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, we're going to continue with the rest of the Braita, and he says something else that's interesting. Yater al ken amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, lo yisa adam isha b'medina zo, v'yadech v'yisa isha b'medina acheret, shema yizdavegu ze laze, v'nimsa ach noset achoto. Similarly, just like one should not go to some kind of drunken party and all that, so too, someone should not have a family in one place and then go in a different country and marry there and have a family in that place, because they will not know each other. The people, most people don't travel much, and they couldn't FaceTime each other. And so then one day they might just meet, might happen, and they'll say, oh, look, we have a lot in common, and they may marry each other, not knowing that they may be a half-brother and half-sister with the same father. So if you're going to have two families, it should be in the same place, so at least they know who the families are. They know each other. All right, so that's what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said. Now, Ini, hold on. Is this really true that this is not allowed? We're going to see that there are sages that did just that. And so therefore must be permitted. V'harav kikla de dad de shir machriz v'amar man havya leyoma. V'rav Nachman kikla de shchenziv machriz v'amar man havya leyoma. We see that Rav and Rav Nachman, both prominent sages in Bavel, when they would travel, they would go and say, "Who will be my wife for a day?" When they were traveling away from their wives, they didn't want to be alone, and so they would do this temporary marriage so that they could have someone to be with. Now, right now, we're assuming that, in fact, they would consummate these marriages and possibly have children there in a different country. And this would contradict what we said before. All right, we're going to see a different interpretation of this in a minute, but there is evidence that in Persia, this was a common thing to do for people traveling. And so these sages seem to have done so as well. So doesn't this contradict having two families in two places? The answer is Shane Rabbanan de Pekia Shemaihu. Sages are different because they're renowned. Everybody knows. If your father is Rav Nachman, then the kids are going to go around and say, "I am so and so, the son of Rav Nachman." And everybody will know this is a child of Rav Nachman. And therefore, if that child, son, meets a daughter from the hometown of Rav Nachman, then they'll know, "Oh, my father's also Rav Nachman." They'll know that they're siblings. Then they won't marry each other. Okay, now just a question on this practice of Rav and Rav Nachman. How could they do that? We have a halacha that once a man engages a woman and asks her to marry, and she agrees, she has to assume she's nida and wait 7 clean days, because out of this excitement that she just got engaged, that may cause her to bleed. There's a halacha l'maaseh today. You can't do a shotgun wedding, because if she just decides, okay, we're getting married tonight. No, you have to wait 7 days before you can, before a wedding from the time that she knows that she's proposed to. Okay, so how could they do this? Because now they're going to go there for a day. They're going to announce, hey, who wants to be my wife for a day when they arrive, and then they're going to get married that very day. But don't they have to wait 7 days? Rabbanan sheluchaihu havu mishaderi umede'eluhu. Answer number 1 is they would send messengers beforehand, planning their trip. They would send a messenger a week before and say, "Listen, the Rav is coming next week. Who wants to be his wife for a day?" And that way the woman will then wait 7 clean days, and only then the Rav Nachman would come and take them. That's answer number 1. The other opinion says, no, the rabbis would not consummate a marriage with them. Rather, they would just have yichud. They're married, so they're permitted to have yichud, and they would sleep in the same room, but they would not be intimate with each other. What's the point of that? Well, because someone who has bread in his basket is not like someone who does not have bread in his basket. In other words, like, on a fast day, you're hungry all day, you can't wait to eat. When the fast is over, then you don't feel so hungry. You're like, okay, if I have to wait another half hour, it's no big deal. Because psychologically, right, just knowing that you can't eat, right, is you already feel hungry. This is like, on Yom Kippur night, you feel hungry. Why? You just ate a big meal 2 hours earlier. Just knowing you can't eat, that is psychological suffering. But knowing that you could eat if I wanted to, then you don't feel hungry. And so too, if a man is away on a trip and is without his wife, so now he has no outlet, he has no one to be with. Psychologically, he's going to be disturbed. But if he has a wife there who, if he wanted to, he could be with her, so then he does not have, his desire is calmed down just knowing that she's there. So they never actually consummated these marriages. They were just psychologically convenient marriages. Okay, very interesting. Tana, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Lo yisa adam ishto vedato legarsha, mishum shenemar al tachrosh al re'echa vehu yoshev labetach itach. This is another statement of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, although it relates to what we just said, that a person should not marry his a wife, where when he has in mind that he's going to divorce her. He's going to do a temporary marriage just to be with her, but really he doesn't love her, and he's going to divorce her after a short time. That's not the right thing to do, because it says in Mishleh, do not devise evil against your neighbor, and he as he dwells securely with you. If someone puts their trust in you, and this woman is saying, okay, I'm putting my trust in you, I'm giving you myself, assuming that you know this is a long-term relationship, and he is only leading her on and tricking her, and so that's not a nice thing to do. One should not do that. All right, then you can go and ask, how could Rav Nachman do that? So Rambam actually says here that if it's known, if you tell her before, you know, this is the arrangement, then you're not deceiving her. So then have other problems, but at least not a problem of deceiving her, and then would not violate this pasuk. Okay, and next section of the Mishnah. The next section of the Gemara, which is going to continue till tomorrow, is going to enter into Dineh Mamonot. The ramifications of the cases that we've been talking about, which we discussed in terms of Arayot, also have an important impact on when someone dies, who will inherit, who is the proper child of this marriage, of this Yibum, and therefore how much inheritance will that person get. The Gemara is going to present about 7 different scenarios and go through each one to figure out what would be the proper law in terms of separating the inheritance. So, case number 1. Safek v'yavam shabao lachlok b'nichse mitna. We have a person died without children, and then the yavam jumps the gun, does not wait 3 months, but then does yibum after 2 months, and then turns out she is pregnant and has a child, and we're not sure this child, who's called Mr. Safek, is he a 9-month baby from the yavam, from the deceased, in which case he's a son and would that's his son, or is it a child of the yavam, and it's a 7-month-old baby. So now the deceased inheritance is now ready to be divvied up. Who will inherit it? That's the question. So here's 2 sides. Safek amar ana bar mitnahu v'nichse didihu. Says, I am the biological legal son of the deceased, and therefore the land all goes to me, right? Doesn't go to the brothers, goes to the child. Okay. Ve'yavam amad at berai didiat. Whereas the Yavam says, no, you are my son. You're a 7-month-old baby. Your 7-month pregnancy, you are my son, and therefore that land, my brother has no children, that land goes to me. I in fact did yibum, so I get the land because of that. Remember we said, although according to the Peshat of the Torah, the child that's born from yibum should inherit, but the rabbis make that midrash and say, no, the brother inherits the land of the deceased. So the Yavam says, you are my son, and therefore I inherit the land, and you get 0 from that land. Eventually, when he dies, okay, then the child can get something. In this case, neither side has absolute proof. In fact, no one actually knows what the status of the child was and who was the father. So therefore, this property is hanging with an uncertainty, and therefore, since it's an uncertainty and there's no chazakah, no one is holding on to it from before that there would be hamosim chavero. So they split it evenly. We have a graph of this case, which is Miriam here, who was married to Reuven, and he dies, and then without any living children, and then Shimon does yibum after 2 months only, and then we have this child. We're not sure, is it a child of Reuven and should inherit Reuven, or is a child of Shimon, and therefore Shimon inherits his brother, and so Shimon and Mr. Safek will split it evenly. All right, so that's the first simple case, and now we get a little bit more complicated. The next case is about Safek, Ubnei Yavam Shabao Lachlok B'nichse Mitna. Same Mr. Safek we have, but now the Yavam also died, and leaving his children. and they are coming to divide the property of the deceased as follows. Right, there are two people that died. Reuven died. And then before they decided what to do with his property, Shimon also dies. And so now you have Shimon's 100% children, Moshe and Hadon, and Mr. Safek, who he claims that he is the son of Reuven, so he should get all of Reuven's property, whereas Moshe and Aaron say, no, you are our brother, and that property should go to Shimon, because he is the Yavam, and then we will evenly split Shimon and Reuven's property. Okay, so assuming Reuven's property is substantial, all right, they would benefit from having it that way. So let's see what their claims are. Safek amar ahu gavra bar mitnahu. Mr. Safek says, I am, she refers to himself in the royal he. He says he, meaning I am the son of the deceased of Reuven. So v'nichsedidihu, all of that property goes to me. Ubnei Yavan amre at achinu at. Umetanahu deit lach behadan. Whereas the brothers say, hey, you're our brother, right? Welcome. And therefore, the property of the deceased Reuven goes to our father, and we should all split it. You get one portion along with the rest of us, which would only be a third of it. If, for example, if there are two other sons, three altogether. Good. Savur Rabbana. So now we don't have the answer to this case. We're going to try to compare it to a case that we do know, a Mishnah later on Daf Kof. Savur Rabbanan kamed Rab Meshashia lememar. So the rabbis were discussing this in front of their teacher, Rab Meshashia, and they proposed the following solution. Matnitin hi. Oh, this is the same as the case of a Mishnah. Ditanan. Hu eno yoresh otam, vehem yorshim oto. The case of the Mishnah was not Yibum, but rather a case where there's a woman who is married to one man and has children. I'm just using the same chart. There's no other chart, but imagine that these are not brothers. And so she has a couple of children from Reuven. And then Reuven dies. And now, in the meantime, before 3 months are up, he's supposed to wait 3 months before getting remarried in all cases. She doesn't do that. Instead, she marries some other guy, not related, Shimon, within 3 months, and she has a child some 7 months later, and we're not sure, is this a child from the first or a child from the second? In the meantime, they remain married, and Moshe, and have more children, Moshe and Aaron, whoever their name is, with husband B. So we'll call this husband A, husband B. And so they both have fathers, but this one, we don't know if the father is husband A or husband B. And so now what happens? It says, Hu eno yoresh otam. He cannot inherit either way. So, for example, when Shimon dies, so Moshe and Aaron, they say, we are for sure his children. We definitely inherit. Mr. Sefek comes along and says, well, there's 50% chance that I'm your brother. And they said, yeah, but that's not for sure. So therefore, we have a chazakah here. We are for sure his children. You prove it then, and then we'll give you a piece of it. Otherwise, go away. And the same thing would be the other way with Reuven's children, if Reuven died. However, right, so that's the first phrase, Hu eno yoresh otam, vehem yorshim oto. If Mr. Safek dies, then anything that he has, that gets split evenly, because now all of a sudden Reuven's sons will say, oh, that was our brother. Yeah, we should get what he had. And Shimon says, no, he was our brother and we should get what he had. And so because they have an equal claim to his property, therefore they will split it equally. Okay, so that was the case over there. Now, how would that apply here? So the rabbis say to Rabbi Shashia, "V'hacha ipecha hatam amari le aiti re'aya ushkol hacha amar lehu aitu re'aya ushkolu." This case of the boom, it would work the same logic, same principle, but now it would work in the opposite direction over there. In that case, when they are not brothers, they say to Mr. Safek, you bring proof and then you could take it. But here, he can say to them, you guys bring proof and you take if you want. Why? Because in this case, now going back to that, they are brothers in the Yibum case, Mr. Safek definitely inherits something. Either he's the child of Reuven and he gets all of it, or he's the child of Shimon and then gets a third of it. So Safek, he says, I for sure inherit something, so I'm the Vadai. You guys are the ones that aren't sure if you inherit anything at all. Maybe you have zero, right, if I'm the son, or maybe you have a third. So since you guys are in Safek, you have to prove that you deserve something. Otherwise, I am taking it all. So it's the same principle, even though in this case, the Safek would get it, and it's the other siblings that have to prove their claim. So this was what the sages presented to Rav Misharshia as their argument. However, Rav Misharshia disagrees. Amadu Rav Misharshia, mi dameh, is that the same? Hatam inhu vadai ve'ihu safek. Over there, in that case, when they are two unrelated men, they are for sure sons of their father, deceased, and Mr. Safek, we don't know who his father is, so he has no definite claim. So it makes sense over there. Hacha, in the case of Yibum, idi v'idi Safek, and that in this case, both of his claims are in Safek. Yeah, it is true that he will inherit something either way, but it's not because of the same reason that he has anything for sure. It's either he has this, or he has a third because he's the son of Shimon. And those are actually mutually exclusive. So this is a Safek and this is a Safek. So if anything, no, it's the opposite. Moshe and Aaron will get something, at least from Shimon's property, and the Safek that has no definite claim. And therefore, that is not a good comparison. Instead, you'd have to say that Mr. Safek would get the least amount for sure, right? So the least amount would be a third of Reuven's property, because he would get that no matter what. He either gets everything or only a third through Shimon. So he would definitely get a third, and then the rest of Reuven's property, that would have to be divided up equally. So Mr. Safek would get half of the leftover, and the other sons would split the leftovers. So that is that would be the conclusion of Rabbi Shashia. So then we just one more point. Ela idam yalamatintin. If you do want to find a parallel case to that Mishnah, one that regards Yibum, lehadamya, it would be parallel to the following case. Lesafek ubnei Yavam sheba'u lachlok b'nichsei Yavam gufeh. Tehatam amri le aiti re'aya de'achuna at ushkol. This is a case where the Yavam dies. Forget the original brother. Whatever happened to his property happened. And then now, right, so forget Reuven. At what point that Shimon dies, and they're coming to divide Shimon's own property. So there, that would be similar to the case over there. In that case, would be the same, because the children of Shimon will say, we are definitely his children. You are maybe Reuven, maybe Shimon. You're the Safek, so you should bring proof that you are our brother. So that would be the exact equivalent of the case there in that other Mishnah on Daf Kuf, where they are not brothers. So if you want to bring a case, this would be the case. And so this that concludes the discussion of case number 2. Some people count this itself as case number 3. I don't think so. This is just bringing it as a side point because it's parallel. And so we have so far 2 cases, and we're going to bring 5 more cases, but the next one is involved and goes over to the next daf. So we will end here. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.